We are live. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in just a second. I'd like to introduce Bracha, who will be your moderator this evening, and I'm sure she will give you a more thorough introduction of herself as we get started. I wanted to remind everyone that if you registered for this event, you will be entered to win one of three prizes. One is a collection of books from all of tonight's authors. Another is a 3-credit bundle from Libro FM for any audiobooks of your choosing. And the other is a copy of Eat Something, a cookbook that I absolutely love. It has my favorite babka recipe in it. And that will be courtesy of bookshop.org. So thank you and take it away.
Thank you so much, Billy. Thank you to Bookstore Romance Day for hosting this event, and a personal thank you for asking River Dog Book Company to be the sort of moderator for this event. My name is Bracha Roy Fabian, Bracha for short. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the owner of River Dog Book Company. I'm a queer Jewish woman who's currently based in the Midwest. I grew up all around the country and all over the world, and so finding my people, my Jewish people with other intersecting identities was a real pleasure to be asked to be the moderator for this event. I'd happily already read some of your novels for some of our folks that are the writers here with us this evening. And then I was really excited to be introduced to those that I hadn't already picked up. So now I have a lot more Jewish rep on my shelves at home. The perfect season for it, of course, as we head into Hanukkah time. So tonight we are getting to speak with Stacey Agdern, Jean Meltzer, Laura Silverman, Helena Greer, and I'm going to call upon each of them to give you a quick intro to who they are and their work, and then we're going to dive into our conversation. So Stacey, take it away.
Hi, everybody. So glad that you all joined us tonight. My name is Stacey Agdern. I am from a small town outside of New York City, which is reflected in fictional form in a bunch of my books. Miracles and Menorahs is the small town Hanukkah festival romance book of everybody's dreams. And Love and Latkes is the Hanukkah cooking competition romance that we've all been waiting for. I hope everybody has fun tonight, and I'm looking forward to chatting with everyone. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Jean, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jean Meltzer. A lot of you probably know me as the author of The Matzah. The quick tagline, I write unapologetically joyous, super Jewy, chronically fabulous rom-coms. So my books are a lot like me. My first book was a Hanukkah rom-com, and I couldn't be happier to be here today and kick off the holiday with all of you. So thank you for joining us.
That's wonderful. I love that. Unapologetic. We should all be unapologetic, I think, in all the things that we do like that.
Wear your crowns, ladies.
Absolutely. Laura, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Silverman. I'm a Jewish young adult author. I've published 7 books, and I think the most pertinent one for tonight is Recommended for You, which is a Jewish Hanukkah rom-com. It takes place in a bookstore during the holiday season. There's also, thank you for holding that up, there's also It's a Whole Spiel, which is a collection of short stories written by an entire variety of different Jewish young adult authors. And my most recent book, The Summer Nights, came out this summer, another Jewish young adult fiction book. I'm also a freelance editor, so I help people with their books. And I have an Etsy shop where I make Hanukkah products because we don't have enough of those.
We absolutely don't. And for anyone that is unaware of the wonderful Instagram site, I Get Nothing for Telling You About This, definitely check out Hanukkah Fails for all the products that are made by non-Jewish folks that we think that we might want. So really check out Laura's site. And Laura, feel free to drop your Etsy link in the chat. After you've all gone and laughed at Hanukkah Fails, go back and actually buy some things from Laura. So certainly not least, but final in our lineup tonight, Helena, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Helena Greer, and I am a debut romance novelist. My book, Season of Love, is a queer Jewish Christmas rom-com. It is about a bisexual Jewish artist who inherits a Christmas tree farm. And it is the first in the Kerrigan series, which everybody at Kerrigan's is Jewish. And also everyone's gay. And I'm so excited.
So I have to tell you that I felt like I was doing research, Helena, when I read your book, because actually not too long ago, my wife and I had the pleasure of moving back to Wisconsin, where she's from, and we bought our first property, which, being from immigrant backgrounds and backgrounds of people that didn't have generational wealth, we never thought we'd be able to do. And so I was saying we should do a Christmas tree farm as one of our retirement projects with this land that we have. We should plant trees now. And she was like, no, we shouldn't do that. But I was like, oh, look, research. I can learn so much from your book. So thank you for that.
I didn't do any research about Christmas tree farms when I wrote it, so you should not use it as research.
I appreciate the caveat. I feel like the lawyers have made you say this, but I understood. But my first question for all of you on the panel this evening is, obviously, we're here to talk about Hanukkah Jewish romances, but why was it so important for you to have that representation in the books that we're speaking about this evening? Why is it important to include Jewishness, whether it was characters, whether it was culture, and then certainly, why was it important to write about this season's romance and make it Hanukkah?
Well, I'm sure we've all said something like this on a panel before, but the reason I wrote Recommended for You and my other Jewish books is because growing up, I never got to read Jewish books about Jewish joy. The only Jewish characters I saw, had to do with the Holocaust or some other sort of Jewish trauma. And it wasn't until I really started publishing around like 2017, 2018, that we very, very slowly started getting these like mainstream Jewish books on the shelves that were about other things like romance. And so I was like, I want to be part of that. I want to write Jewish joy and put it on the shelves. I want to write a Jewish Hanukkah story, a Hanukkah romance. And I feel so lucky that I've been able to do that. And now all of these like other amazing books are out there as well.
That's the perfect answer. I see a lot of people nodding along. Does anyone have their own version of this story or something slightly different?
I'll jump in. So I had I don't know how old everyone is here, but I've been writing my whole life, my whole career. And my career began basically in NYU Tisch studying dramatic writing. And I always tell the story how this was the 90s and we were taught how to identify a high concept idea. And a high concept idea, for those who don't know, is a log line, one line. It can be sold, you can sell a movie on it. So boy goes to wizarding school. And what we learned was that a high concept idea looked a certain way. It felt a certain way. It had a certain type of protagonist. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s or about to turn 40, where I had an experience with my niece sitting on my lap. And she said to me, Aunt Jeannie, you have a big nose and big noses are ugly. And it broke my heart because this is a little girl who goes to Jewish day school. This is a little girl who, we're not a family that bemoans the size of our nose. I love my beautiful Semitic nose, okay? I love it and I'm happy about it. And, I had a realization that had I had stories where women were the heroes, where women never bemoaned the size of their nose, where Jews were proud of who they were, that my career at 40 would have looked completely different. And it sounds even sadder to say that I had the realization only a week ago that if I never, when I was diagnosed with ME/CFS, had a representation of someone living successfully with chronic illness. It did not exist until, I can't even really think of more than like 3 examples. So for me, I wrote this story never thinking it would be published, but it came out of the realization that the world needed stories like this. My life would have been completely different had I seen these models.
I have so many follow-up questions for you that I'm gonna hold until other people on the panel have had a chance to answer this one. But just wanted to thank you for having those intersecting identities that you've represented in your work. Helena or Stacy, did either of you want to answer that question? Helena, yes.
I just, I grew up, my dad converted to Judaism. And so, I think my experience as an adult with Judaism is that a lot of Jews from all kinds of backgrounds feel like they might not be Jewish enough, right? But as the child, like, of a patrilineal family and a convert family, I always felt like maybe I wasn't Jewish enough to tell these stories. And then I have friends and family say, like, you grew up in a Jewish home with a Jewish parent, like, this is something that's important to you. And so I think I was always someone who was interested in faith. The other part of my family is Unitarian. Both of those faith traditions are like questioning and asking. And as an adult, me and all of my friends are people who are like active in faith communities, and I don't see that a lot in romance outside of like Christian romance. And so I wanted that to be something that was seen. And I feel like Miriam Bloom, who's my main character, is someone who's like from a big, beautiful Jewish family and maybe feels a little bit outside of it, which sort of is my growing up process. I had this gorgeous, incredible, beautiful Jewish step family, and this sort of like mess of a biological family. And I feel like, just, we all see in these stereotypical Jewish families in media, and it's so rare that we just see, like, my experience growing up was just this like hugely welcoming, wonderful, warm family. And I wanted to write stories about like adults in faith communities that are important to them, and also just like write a Jewish family that felt like the one that I grew up in, as a thank you to, as like a celebration of that.
I am loving how much all of these books, all of these works are celebrating ourselves, celebrating our history, celebrating our culture. Again, more on that in a minute. Stacey, did you have something that you wanted to say about your experience writing these books?
So there was an HarperCollins Avon aid that appeared quite a number of years ago called Burning Bright. I have a story in there, and that was my very first traditionally published fiction piece. And it happened at a time in my life where I never, ever, ever, ever expected that would happen. Because again, this was many, many years ago, as Laura was talking about earlier, like the sort of the fact that like Jewish representation was practically impossible to find in literature, and if there were Jews, they were like a secondary side character who maybe possibly eventually would get a tiny little snippet of a little baby romance, right? And it was an amazing and wild experience. And then fast forward quite a number of years later, I had been involved in a project called the Rogue series. I don't know if anybody is familiar with this series. It was a collection of very political, very activist, very strong romances it was like a self-published collection with a whole bunch of just brilliant authors and more about publishing than I could ever learn in my lifetime. It was wonderful. It was difficult, but at the same time, it was amazing. But the thing was, it was, 4 stories that I wrote, the third of which was right around the time of Charlottesville. And I had the lovely little experience of having to call the synagogues around my town to make sure that everyone was okay. But it was 4 stories where I was going through these events politically that I was like mentally processing at the time. And because the thing is, 90% of the time, I don't know about any of you, but when I write something, it's about things that I've already processed, things that I've already sort of thought about and dealt with. I might box myself into a story, but I've already sort of decided about my feelings about it. But these were stories that I was still actively feeling and actively processing. And it took a crap ton out of me because it was 2016, 2017, 2018. These were stories that just took a lot out of me because it was confronting the political. I was basically writing myself the political happily ever after that I wasn't getting as a Jewish woman living in New York. It was not happening. And so I found something that gave me joy. What was it? It was Hanukkah. It was the thing that I came back to all those years ago the most potent source of one of the most potent sources of Jewish joy, one of the most potent and most easy ways to sort of stand up and say, I am Jewish, in a very, as you were saying, Jean, earlier, unapologetic way. And so I wrote this book, Miracles and Menorahs, you know, pulling myself out of this politically like induced, I don't know, like maelstrom of feelings, for lack of a better word of explaining it. And I turned them into this very excitedly Hanukkah excited young woman who is going to save her town's Hanukkah festival no matter what she has to do, like the movies that I was watching on television. So
I love the joy that every single one of you has mentioned in the writing. I think that especially for Jews, where so much of our history is so steeped in trauma, and you know, I think it's very most of us have had the experience about struggling to find books that aren't only about the Holocaust in terms of representation about Jewish characters, but really you could choose any moment in history and find trauma to write about in terms of having Jewish characters represented. So the fact that all of this came from such a place of joy, I think is such a gift. And so even if it wasn't romance-based, it seems like every single one of you is bringing Jewishness into a story from a place of joy. And so one of my questions for you all is that along with that joy, along with Jewish representation, you all also seem to write from such a personal place that it's hard sometimes to say, okay, where does fact begin? Where does fact end? Where does fiction begin? And there are these other intersecting identities, whether it's disability representation, whether it's queer representation, that come into these stories. So for all of you, what other pieces of yourselves, of your lived experience, have you brought into your tales, or what did you do research on? What is something you didn't experience other than a Christmas tree farm? We already found that out, Helena. That you needed to find out more about, that you wanted to bring into your story. So you can answer either way. Something that you've experienced that you brought into your work, or something that you researched or imagined for your work.
I have to tell a story about my great grandmother, Rivka. So, Kerrigan's is owned by this matriarch, Cass, who is the daughter of a family that owns like a national Jewish bakery, and she kind of leaves the family and is sort of the like gray sheep. She's just like a go-go dancer, and she like goes off and does all this. And when they clean out her closets after she dies, it's like just coats and coats and coats and coats and boas. And my great grandmother, Reeve, was born into a family that owns, they still own a grocery store chain in the Midwest. And everybody was kind of like in the family business, and she went off and was like a dancer and a performer and like a society woman in Jewish society in the Quad Cities. And she was like really involved in charities, and she was sort of this like larger than life character. And when she died and we cleaned out her closets, we just found like coats and fabulous dresses and like 1960s hats. And she was this larger than life amazing character. And so like a lot of that made its way in some way into Kerrigan's.
She sounds absolutely incredible. And I have to tell you, suspect a little bit that there might be some people in my family that when I clean out their closet, some things like that. So I think we all probably know at least one person in our lives that we're like, oh, we wish we could clean out their closet right now and see what's going on in there. Thank you so much for sharing that and for putting her into your story.
I can add that Jean was talking about chronic illness, and that's something that I wish I had in one of my books. I've been living with chronic pain and fatigue for a decade now, and it's actually something that I haven't been able to put into one of my stories yet, and it's something that I crave to see so much more on the page, because the only disability narratives we tend to get are these very problematic and hurtful ones. And it's inspiring to see people who suffer with chronic illness like putting this on the page And it's something that I am now trying to do in my next book that I'm working on. I think I avoided it so far because it's something, even though it's been 10 years, it's something newer for me. I'm still like learning how to live with chronic illness and like find my new place of like happiness with it, versus writing a Jewish book. I've been Jewish my entire life and I have so much happiness from being Jewish. And so that was very easy for me to put on the page. So it's something I aspire to do, and I'm impressed and grateful by the others who have done it already.
Absolutely. And it's so wonderful to be inspired by each other's work. As we were saying, now there are so many people that are writing about Jewishness, and so it's a whole new world about what we can include. Like it's like the People magazine, like they're just like us. Like we can also include other parts of our lives.
So I just want to say, Laura, thank you for sharing that, because I know it's really hard to sort of like come out about the chronic illness, chronic pain that you live with. I will say that for the matzo ball, for me, I was an advocate a long time before I wrote the matzo ball. So I had been working in the MECFS community, meeting with members of Congress and Senate, writing lots of letters, going to Washington, D.C. And so when I knew that the matzo ball was getting published, I saw it as this incredible opportunity to sort of educate people in a sort of fun and informative way, but fun and informative. You can take the girl out of rabbinical school, but can't take the rabbi out of the girl. So, I put, my whole heart and my whole soul into it. And I'll just add that like my third book is about chronic pain. I know we're jumping, but it's something I haven't processed because it just started for me about 2 years ago. And I mean, I guess, Laura, I just say, you're such a good writer. Just write, you'll be fine. Like, just tell your story. It'll be fine. But definitely, like, we need more of these books out there. What made me realize how important it was to tell these stories was that once I became an advocate, I cannot tell you how many women would lean in and say, I'm sick too. I have MS, I have Lyme, I have fibro. The fact that so many women were hiding it, and it affects our ability to get jobs. I've been homebound for over a decade. We need to change this. We need to talk about it, because nothing changes in our society unless we talk about it and demand change. So yeah, fighting the good fight.
Absolutely. And I think that's also a particularly, and maybe it's just me growing up with an activist Jewish mother, but I think that's a particularly Jewish trait also, to keep questioning, to keep fighting the good fight, to keep making things better, not just for ourselves, but for our communities. Yeah, exactly. Tikkun olam 100%. Very much so. Stacey, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to the question, which was something of yourself that you brought into your work or something that you researched for your work.
So I've gone back and forth, and after listening to each of you talk about the things that you bring to the table and the things that you talk about in your books, I've decided actually to go into something that I talked about a little bit in History of Us. And actually, it kind of appears throughout my books. There's a theme of Jewish activism and sort of tying to Jewish causes, and there's a reason for that. I have a younger brother. I am ridiculously proud of him in many, many, many different ways. He currently works for HIAS. He's worked with True Rabbis. He's worked with a whole bunch of different organizations. And so doing grassroots and otherwise activism for Jewish causes, for that he was working on the politics side with unions. He was doing a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff. And, I said in my dedication to the new book, any character with a big heart who fights for social justice, that's him. That's my brother. So, also, Jean, you were talking about rabbinical school, and I was thinking about my rabbi and how I knew that he'd read miracles and menorahs. The rabbi, my dad goes to conservative services every Saturday morning in a way that actually reminds me that I kind of put into Levin Latkes. And he read miracles and menorahs, and he said, I recognize Leonard Abraham. Leonard Abraham was 99. He was over 100 when he died. He was the stories that this man could tell. He was like the legendary grandfather of the conservative part of Temple Beth Abraham in Tarrytown, New York. He was just, I had to. And when it came time to put in a local history expert, he got his name from Leonard Abraham. So there you go.
Thank you. What beautiful tribute. That's really, really lovely that you were able to pull that through into your work. Speaking of our work, I know that there might be some people in the audience here who are really interested in getting published themselves. And so I really want to hear from all of you. What was a quick story about the path to publication, roadblocks or not? Sometimes publishers are really looking for new representation these days. So, whether it's, oh, you struggled for X amount of time and you stood on the shoulders of these greats who have come before, whether it's, oh my gosh, I got discovered in a pit mat on Twitter and it was 6 months from, tweet to publication. I'd love to hear your publication stories or any advice that you have for people looking to get published today. Writing specifically, I should say, representative literature.
So I can take this first. So I got my agent from cold querying back in, I think it was 2015 is when I queried. And it is like kind of an asterisk to the cold querying story. So at the time I was an intern at a literary agency. And so I asked my agency, hey, I'm sending out my novel. Should I send it to someone at this agency? And they said yes. And supposedly the story goes that upstairs while I was working downstairs, my agent was like 100 pages into this book and he was like, hey, this book is pretty good. Let me go see who wrote it. And he was like, oh, my intern wrote it. She's sitting downstairs right now. And he ended up finishing it and loving it and offering me representation. But I do want to say cold querying works. I did have offers from people who did not know me personally. So I did have cold query offers as well. And that is still like the number one way I recommend to query. But what's interesting as far as like diversity or marginalization goes is my first book is not Jewish. The main character is not Jewish. There are no characters in it that are Jewish. And that is because when I wrote that book back in 2014, 2015, it literally didn't occur to me to write a Jewish character. This was like just at the beginning of the incredible We Need Diverse Books movement. And like I said, there just weren't other Jewish books, popular Jewish books on the shelf. So my first book does not feature a Jewish character. And it wasn't until my second book that I was like, wait a second, I'm not in my own story. Like I need to put my own experiences in these stories.
Isn't it amazing how sometimes we're looking at something and it's like, oh, right. It seems so simple when you think of it, finally. So thank you for being really honest about that. And would anyone else like to share their story, their journey?
I want to really shout out. Jean, go ahead.
No. Well, I'll just go give a quick rundown. There's an old saying, every overnight success is 10 years in the making. Mine was 10 years in the making. So I want to just put that out there because, I was agented, I had an R&R, I got dumped by my agent, I got really sick, I didn't write for 2 years, I decided to focus on my joy, I was just writing for fun, and then at some point I wrote the matzo ball. And I got an agent in a day, cold query, and the book sold 2 weeks later. It took 10 years. It was the careful, it was the, what they say, the skill set met perfect timing. The industry had opened up and the book was at the right level. So I think that was it. It was just perfect timing and the right book, but it took 10 years. In terms of advice, I'm going to say this: do not put your value into a book. The book is not your worth. The book, whether you sell a book in traditional, self-publishing, indie, whether you write it for your niece, whatever you're doing, that is good enough. Be proud of yourself. You're doing something that anyone else, most people will never do. So don't put your worth into a book. Just write because you love it.
Wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you so much for cheering us all on with that. Helena.
Yeah, I had to quit writing for 12 years. I wrote all my life. I got my my bachelor's in creative writing, and then I quit writing for 12 years, and I went to library school, and I had a career, and I had a kid, and I was inspired to write Season of Love with, I had some gay rage about the lack of representation in Hallmark films, and I was inspired to write, and I just want to say that, like, it took a long time, the process of like querying. I did get my agent through DV Pit, but I did a lot of cold querying, and the entire process of that. Someone said to me, you know, I have a friend who you should talk to about the process, and it was Felicia Grossman, who's an incredible, phenomenal Jewish writer. And Felicia was so kind. Like, I slid into her DMs, and she was like, yes, let's be friends. I'll beta read your novel. Like, just like the kindest, most generous human being. And Laura and I have a very close mutual friend. And when Laura was in town, our friend said, hey, do you guys want to like get together and have lunch? And it was right before it was right in the middle of me getting offered representation. And Laura knows my agent. So like Laura was willing to sit down with me at lunch and just talk me through, like, is this a good agent for you? Like, should you say yes to this offer? And Stacy was like, as soon as my book got announced, was like, let's be friends. What can I do? How can I support you? And so I just want to say that, like, at every point in this, like, very long, very stressful, very anxiety producing process, Jewish writers have just like shown up and been extraordinarily generous with like love and support. And the process of publishing is just really opaque and really confusing and frustrating. And yeah, there was just never a moment where I thought I always had like 5 people whose DMs I could slide into and say like, I don't know if this is normal, what's happening? So I just really want to like shout out to people who want to get published, like, find your people, find the people who you can do that with, but also like all of the Jewish writers in this sort of like Twitter verse. We're just so happy and kind with this stranger showing up and saying, hello, I wrote a book, please help.
You know, Stacy earlier, when all the authors and I were right before this event started, described sort of this group and as mishpacha, which is family, and I think that Helena, you just so perfectly gave examples of how we all come together, even if we are, you know, we're all family in that way. Stacy, did you want to share your experience?
So definitely, my journey was crazily long. But the thing that I'm just going to speak very, very briefly on something that happened to me that is very unique. And I honestly think that I would probably have lost my mind if it weren't for Jeannie Moon and Jennifer Grayson, who were literally, and my buddy Vuli Walker, who were all there with me as this was going down. I was one of the wild, ridiculous cases that got an offer before an agent. To the point, and the thing is, like, I'd been in writing groups and writing communities for a long, long time by the time that this happened in 2019. And I was like, wait a second, what is this? You know, literally, like, the email that I got was just literally, what is this? You know, because I had no idea, right? I had no idea what an offer looked like, because people talk about, oh, we get an offer. What does that mean? You know, I literally called Jeannie Moon, and she was like, Stacy, it's okay. This is what you do. So suffice to say, it's important to find your people. It is important to find your mishpacha. It is important to like get yourself like I tried it as, of course, like I'm gonna say, if anybody, wants help, it's because so many people have helped me. And I think that's like the best part of this industry, right? Like when you find your community, when you find those people who are going to because you want them to succeed, you want everybody to do well. Like it's never been, I don't think, a zero-sum game in a lot of ways. And so many people believe it is, and I honestly don't think it is. Especially like as all of us are dealing with the interesting circumstance of going through like something that we had once considered a concrete ceiling, not just a glass ceiling, but a concrete ceiling, coming through, not expecting that there was something above for us, right? Like all of those years, like before I saw Zoe Archer's, who I adore, Lady X's Cowboy all those years ago, like, and Alina Adams's books, even before that, and my own ridiculously like terrifying and excited experience with Lorna Michaels' Candle for Nick from Silhouette Special Edition. Like, we didn't think that was possible. We had dreams, we hoped that, but like it still felt like a concrete ceiling. And so I think it's kind of a unique experience for all of us. And I think that bonds us closely. And yes, dear God, thank you for Felicia Grossman, because Lord knows, I would definitely not have written anything without her. But that's another story entirely.
Thank you so much. I just love how everyone has been so supportive and so of each other, and then of all of us who have yet to publish, but have that in our dreams. Thank you for paving the way and breaking that concrete ceiling, breaking the glass ceiling that came after it, and leading the way for all of us. I now have a few specific questions for you all, and then I'd like to just encourage the audience that if you have a question for any of our authors this evening, please feel free to drop it in the chat. There will be time for us to take audience questions a little bit nearer to the end. So please make sure that if you have any burning questions that you would like your authors to answer, you drop them in there so that we can make sure to do that. So I'd love to quickly start off with a question. I'm just going to go down the row as you all are on my screen. So Helena, my question for you is that Season of Love, I definitely would consider it part of that sort of, as you said, Hallmark Christmas movie, now hopefully more than just Christmas movie genre. It does have certain rom-com elements, but it also has a lot of really deep, and some might even say heavy, topics that people are going through in the book, a little bit of trauma that folks are trying to get past in various ways. Can you talk to me a little bit about not backing off? I love that you didn't back off from the heavy content in your book. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Did you get any pushback? What made you, write about it in the first place with the rom-com elements? It made for such a rich story.
It actually is less, it's rom-commier now than it was when it started. The entire first act was just them sitting Shiva. And so it was like a much heavier book than it is now. And my editors were kind of like, maybe we could make it lighter. Like, this is a rom-com. Maybe we could make it.
We just laugh about death all the time. It's fine.
Calmier. They're literally just sitting Shiva this whole book, Helena. I was like, yeah, man, Shiva's there's eggs and like it's great. What's the problem here? My editor is Jewish. She just was like, I don't think this is gonna go as I think there's a market issue here. So this book is I hope really Jewish, and it's also really queer. And the truth of queer holidays is that sometimes they're traumatic. I mean, the holidays are traumatic for everybody sometimes, like depending on your relationship with your family and going home, and there's like baggage. But I didn't, I came of age, I came out of the closet in 1997, which is the year before Matthew Shepard was murdered. It was right after protease inhibitors kind of came out. People were dying. My mom's two best friends died of AIDS. And so my experience, like much like I find Judaism joyful, I find being queer the most joyful thing possible in my life. I'm so grateful to be queer. I think it's a gift, but I also, like, there's some trauma that comes along with the experience of like living a long time in the queer community, of coming home at Christmas as a queer person. And so I wanted that to be the full experience of that, not just the surface stuff. And you know, also just I was writing a lot of Hallmark beats, right? And so in Hallmark movies, girl doesn't come home for 10 years to her hometown. But like, if you're trying to write a full-length novel, you have to ask the question of why girl hasn't come home for 10 years to her hometown, because that's like a weird thing to do when she really loves her family in her hometown. And so, I mean, I'm sure there are more answers to that than trauma, but the answer that came to mind was like something really traumatic happened and then she didn't come home for 10 years. I wrote, Miriam has a big childhood trauma, and she goes into sort of a dissociative fugue state to heal that. And I'm a trauma survivor, and I, you know, to sort of dissociate. And so like that was something that was true for me. And yeah, I felt like it was, I felt like it would be doing a disservice to these very real people. Noelle is sober, and to be a sober alcoholic, you have to be a drunk alcoholic first. And so I felt like that would be, I just felt like it would be doing a disservice to both of these real, richly lived human beings if I skated over the top of the realness for them. So hopefully I balanced it well. Like hopefully it's also like a funny.
Yes, there is a happy ending. This is genuinely a
It does have a very
romance
happy
with-
ending.
Yeah.
It is like a pink. I feel like sometimes people don't know because it's like a really funny pink book. But cute pink book. They are two people who meet at a funeral and then sit Shiva together and then process their grief and trauma together. But there's also smooching and a magical cat.
As all good queer love stories are. So there's such a big element of for anyone else on the call that's queer, that's a joke about the trauma in the queer community. Sorry. Thank you so much for that. I will say this is gonna sound like a backhanded compliment, and I don't mean it as such, truly. But as a debut novel, I don't think that you often see that level of character, not development, but on the page. You don't often see what made them. It's like sort of alluded to sometimes, and so this felt so. Gosh, it felt so deep, and I just keep going back to Rich. About it. So thank you so much.
I grew up in 12-step programs. We just tell everybody everything about all of our internal traumas, like the first time we read them. It's literally something I'm trying to train myself out of. So like,
that's
now
so
I just
real.
write novels about it.
That's so real. That's what I cannot wait for the next book already. So thank you for that. Laura, my question for you is that one of the reps, and I do call it rep in your book, particularly this one that we're going to talk about, is Southern rep. And I think that's okay. I had the pleasure of living in the South for a little while. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina. Shout out to Quail Ridge Books, a great independent bookstore down there. But having spent a few years in the South, there were definitely things that I recognized about living down there. And you wove it together also so seamlessly with being Jewish as well. Can you speak a little bit about why bringing Southern rep into your work is so important to you?
Absolutely. So I was born in the South. I'm from the suburb of Atlanta's, and you know, for the South, I lived in a fairly Jewish community. My public school, I probably had like 1 to 3 Jewish kids in all of my classes at public school, which is, you know, pretty good compared to a lot of other places in the South. So growing up, I didn't feel exceptionally othered or anything like that. I felt like I had like a good, strong Jewish community, but there were certainly all of these little things that added up. For example, I believe I talk about it, and you asked for perfect. Teachers were just not good about like the Jewish high holidays. We all had to take off of school, and teachers did not prepare for that. So we would be missing tests. They wouldn't have our homework like in advance for us. Like, you know, I didn't experience any like outright anti-Semitism, but just like the lack of like knowledge and consideration. And then when I moved on I went to college at the University of Georgia, I would start to experience some more incidents, nothing terrible, but people would ask me if I spoke Jewish. Like I would just be the first Jewish person they had ever met and they didn't know anything. So it was kind of like, the exoticism element. And I just wanted to represent that experience in the books I write of what it's like to be a Jew in the South.
I really, really felt that. I spent some time when I first came to America in Southern Indiana, and my family was asked by someone to feel the horns on our head. Like that was something they legitimately learned. That wasn't something that they had, that wasn't a joke. And I had not known that was a thing that they would learn. And so A, I didn't speak the language very well, and B, who gets asked that as a small child, even, it was very, very alarming. But even now as an adult, I think we've probably all been in the situation where something gets scheduled on Yom Kippur. And it's like, really, out of all the days that you couldn't look up Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, out of all the other days on the calendar, to just make sure that those weren't the ones something was scheduled on. Okay. So I really felt that, and I really felt that come through your work.
Thank you. I remember there was one time in my adult years, I was with a group of maybe 15 other adults in the South, and someone sneezed and I said Gesundheit, and all 15 people turned to me and were like, what? Like no one had ever heard of that. Bless you. And I was like, what? How is this possible?
There's a certain type of sheltered living and sheltered experience I find in some communities. So thank you for giving all of us who have experienced that moment of recognition. Jean, you have to know what my question is going to be about, and you actually set the stage for this, so it's your own fault. But you said that you sort of had learned how to write with a big concept idea, and the matzo ball, you hit it out of the park. The matzo ball is going to be a major motion picture. Did you know you had a big concept idea when you were writing the matzo ball? Tell us about that.
I do think that I tend to look for high concept ideas. I think that I know what makes a high concept idea, and I don't really write any book if I don't think it's something new, if it's something big, if it challenges me in some way. So did I think matzo ball was going to roll on without me? I think I felt that it was going to be a big book, but I don't think you always think and wonder, but like last week I hit the international bestseller with Sweden. I hit the bestseller list in Sweden. So I was like, did I ever think I'd be a bestseller in Sweden? No, I never thought that. Did I ever think I'd be doing a Zoom call with Lance Bass after 10 years of being homebound? No, I never thought me and Lance would be hanging out.
You and your buddy Lance.
Yeah, me and my buddy Lance, me and Ben Savage, me and Lance. So yeah, it's been weird. But I see it, I say this over and over again, I see it as a sacred responsibility. I love the Jewish people. I would have been just as happy to be a rabbi and never write a book. That's the truth. But I'm in this position. And so I feel it as a sacred responsibility to do good work, to model Jewish pride, and to just hopefully make that matzo ball a Hanukkah classic, because it's only going one of two ways. It's either going to be a Hanukkah classic or a disaster. So we're going to work really hard to make it a Hanukkah classic, a movie you want to see every year. And that's the goal. So, yeah.
I mean, the team that it seems like they're putting together, I don't see how it could be anything but the Hanukkah classic of all of our dreams.
I'm hoping, I've started to see the names coming in of screenwriters.
Is Mayim a part of it?
I can't say nothing. I can't say anything. Come on, I'm gonna get me in trouble. Lance is gonna email me.
Right, your buddy Lance is my buddy
Lance. So,
well, my fingers are crossed.
Yes.
Thank you, and Mazel Tov. Congratulations, truly.
Thank you.
Cannot wait to see it.
Yeah, me too.
Stacy, your series. For those who haven't devoured Stacy's series, and I say that very seriously because food is such a big part of them. And I want the cookbook. that inevitably I think needs to come from this series. But these are such a perfect, another perfect, I think, Hallmark moment. Did you write them with a movie script in mind? Did you have the town setting? Like, I would love for you to tell me the world that you envisioned when you started this series. And is this it? Is it a trilogy? Do we get more?
So it is a trilogy, but I will actually say that the Last Girl Standing series, which starts June 1st with the B'nai Mitzvah Mistake, also from Thule, is a spin-off series. There is a hanging character in Love and Latkes who does not have his own book, but he will get book 3 of the Last Girl Standing series. I think quite a number of years ago, like and over the last couple of years, there have been constant conversations about what small town romance was supposed to be, and how 90% of the time, small town romances were set in certain places. And if you didn't go to church on Sunday, there'd be a reverend asking where you were on all of these things that were happening. And that sat in the back of my head. As I said, I also watched a great number during the period of 2017 to now of Hallmark movies. I watched a ton of them. Fun fact, one of my favorites is Christmas at the Plaza and A Timeless Christmas, which was based on a book by Zoe Archer, who wrote the book under Alexis Stanton, who wrote the book under the Alexis Stanton pen name, which
my mother-in-law would know exactly what you're talking about. She, I'm sure, is watching a Hallmark movie right now. So
like, they are fantastic, and I love the fact that they're doing more Hanukkah movies, but that's beside the point, and I'm excited for the matzo ball movie. But anyway, I digress. So mentally, I was watching these movies, and in the back of my mind, all of these small town books were set in places that looked nothing like what I grew up with, that had nothing of those elements of the small town that I grew up in, the small town bubble that was 40 minutes north of New York City, that the small town bubble where everybody still know your name, but wondered where you were if you didn't go to Friday night services. The small town bubble where you'd go to the traditional old bakery in the next town over that had, challahs baked in an original oven, which sadly closed, years ago. But all of those little bits of things that I saw growing up. And also all of these Hallmark movies require, and all of these other things all decide between living in that small town and living in the city. And as someone who knows that in reality, large cities are all just small towns sort of mushed together. That's literally what they are. They're small communities all over the cities, people together, right? And I was like, this is ridiculous. So what happened? Hollyville happened. Hollyville, Rivertown, and Briarwood, which is where the new series takes place, are towns not very far from each other, located on the Hudson River. The southernmost town is Rivertown. Hollyville is in the middle, and then Briarwood is just a bit north. If you look on a map, you might possibly see similarities to Irvington, Tarrytown, and Briarcliff Manor, but I wouldn't say that. And of course, you have the Long Island town of Rockcliffe Manor, which is the setting of History of Us. And it is set on Long Island because a lot of the mythology behind History of Us was inspired by a bit of history that actually took place on Long Island. And so to talk about the story of Ophidian Castle. So I had to kind of like, I had to set it there. I had to set History of Us on Huntington on Long Island, in Rockcliffe Manor, I should say, on Long Island, because I needed to be close to the historical material. So personally, I would love, and I'm putting this out into the world just because I feel like it, because this is one of those special nights that we're all together and we're having a grand old time. I would love for Point Grey, which is Seth Rogen's production company, to make either like a movie or a series out of these books that are so completely intertwined in a lot of ways.
Of course, from your lips to Seth Rogen's and God's ears. Absolutely.
Exactly. And it's the other thing I will say that I don't think I've actually talked about publicly before, just very, very, very briefly. The congregation in Miracles and Menorahs is Reform. There's a Reformish congregation in history, but the rabbi is inspired by Sandra Lawson, who is a Reconstructionist rabbi whose teachings I found inspiration in. And then Rivertown's congregation is inspired by a conservative congregation. So there are bits and pieces of each of these different sort of communities of practice in sex and Judaism.
That's such an important note. Thank you so much. So for people looking for those different representations of Judaism in general, can read them through your books. And I'm glad that there will be a spinoff series as well. We are coming to the end of our event, but we have one question left and from the audience. And then we also have, I just want to do a really quick plug. All of these authors' works are available not only via their websites, but then also you can support them through Riverdog Book Company. So thank you so much for that. There's a link in the chat. And so what our audience question is, have you all worked with Jewish agents and or editors? And if not, any stories about what your journey has been like without that particular type of allyship support? And I just want to thank Charlotte, who asked that question, because Helena, I think it was you who said that you worked with that your editor is Jewish, and it hadn't even occurred to me, oh, of course, what is it like working with someone that has no clue what you're writing about, or that does? That's great. As somebody that literally finished a sensitivity read last night on a middle grade novel about two young Jewish girls, of course, that's a thing that we do. We get sensitivity reads for our own work now. So please, if you all don't mind taking a quick minute or two to answer. Have you worked with Jewish editors or agents? If not, anything you want to say about your journey?
Sure. So I've worked with quite a few different editors over my time now, and only one of them has been Jewish. My agent is not Jewish. And it was for the anthology It's a Whole Spiel, which is the collection of short stories. And to the surprise of no one, when we tried to sell that book, we received a lot of passes of people in so many words telling us that it was too niche and, they didn't see a place for it in the market. So I'm not surprised that when someone finally did buy it, it was a Jewish editor, because she knew and she saw the need for a book like that on the shelf. And it was of all of my Jewish books, it was the perfect one to have a Jewish editor for, because that anthology encompasses such a wide range of Jewish experiences and really goes more into Jewish living than any of my other books. So I'm really glad we had someone on board who understood and I didn't have to explain anything to.
That absolutely makes perfect sense. You're absolutely right on that. Does anyone else have a story that they'd like to share about working with or not working with a Jewish editor or agent? Helena? Or Jean, sorry.
Keep going in front of Elena. So basically, no, my editors, basically no one I work with in my publishing house is Jewish. I have to double check all my own Hebrew, all my own Talmud, all my own Midrash and Mishnah. I call up my rabbi friends, I go through Sepharia, I double check, triple check everything. I will say, however, kudos to Mira and Harlequin and their Romance Includes You diversity initiatives. Emily Ohanianian is no longer my editor. I have a new editor now. When I was writing the matzo ball, even though she was not Jewish, she said, make it as Jewish, more chronic illness, Go, 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 lean into it. And they never, ever asked me to pull back. So I went totally in. They trusted me to know my community, meaning the breadth of my community, from secular, reform, to from adjacent, to from. The only thing I would say is we had a little bit of argument in the beginning about kissing. I wanted to edge people slowly into kissing. So, I did not put kissing up front in the matzo ball. So that's it. But I do have one Jewish agent, but she was brought on from my agent who is not Jewish because she wanted to make sure that the book spoke properly for a community. So she wanted to see if it resonated for her.
That's so lovely. Wow, what an incredible commitment to you
Harlequin
and
Mira
a writer
and HarperCollins. They don't get enough props.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. We will absolutely give them all the props in the world for doing that. Helena, I know that you had wanted to say something here.
Oh, I just wanted to say that my agent is Jewish and bisexual, and my editor is Jewish and bisexual. And I think that Jean was talking about sort of the moment of the book being where it needed to be and the market being where it needed to be. And I think that when I pitched my book, my agent was really looking for a queer Jewish book. And my editor, Sam Brody at Forever, Season of Love is the first book that she acquired herself, and she was really like going through the slush pile for her boss and found my book and was like, I have been looking for a queer Jewish book. This is it. Like, I want to champion this. So I don't even know that mine is that great. Like, Jake Maya Arlo's queer Jewish book is better than mine. It was just like the moment was ready for the right people who were looking for that at the right time.
I feel like so much of publishing is that way as well. And so much of what happens in life is the right thing at the right time. So thank you for living that by example. Stacey, did you want to close us out with a story or an idea from that?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things. I want to send, so my agent, neither my agent nor my editor is Jewish. I love them all. Lynette Novak, who is my agent, basically is, has supported me no matter what, what's happened, like with the books, with this new series, like basically like, sometimes I tend to soapbox myself into books, especially with parts of history and Love and Luck is where I said some things that I'm currently terrified about, words like gentrification that appear in Love and Luck is, but my agent and my editor were all just like, yes, please, you're fine. Like, we want to see more of this. To that point, Julie Sturgeon is wonderful. And she's my editor and we love sitting together and talking about stuff, but also Jane Porter. So, a special shout out to Jennifer Grayson for Holidays in Manhattan, which was Thule's first interfaith. Jennifer Grayson, I love her to pieces. And without her opening that door for me at Thule, this Miracles and Menorahs never would have happened. And then I want to send love also to Rebecca Crowley, whose Shine a Light comes out on December 1st, and Kelly Kane, whose Kiss from the Past comes out in April. Let me tell you, the fact that I love her cover, her new cover, and the back of and my cover for the B'nai Mitzvah Mistake, and like how they intertwine together, I love it so much. She had this amazing series about chef siblings, and this new series, oh my God, it's just fantastically beautiful. And Enzo the Passover Seder, like the first book in this new series is wonderful, and Enzo the Passover Seder, and I am like dying. Like, anyway.
That sounds incredible.
So,
truly.
Yeah.
What an amazing circumstance.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that there are more Jewish stories in Thule because of Jennifer and the fact that she opened the door for me. So, but also I want love to the Romance Schmooze Mishpacha, the Discord server, because it's full of happiness and joy, and like all of the Jewish writers that are that are writing, that are working, that are doing so much, and readers as well, because there are a lot of us there too. So finding
What a
our
wonderful
place.
way.
And
Thank you. What
yes.
a wonderful way to close out the event is by giving that love to the community and to the other writers that have come before us and the writers that are continuing to do the work. So please, everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to Bookstore Romance Day for putting this panel together. Go out, find your Jewish writers, your queer writers, your disabled writers, find your community, read all the books. And thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you to all the writers who are here with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you have happy Hanukkah next month.
I can't wait to read your book when I get home.
Wonderful. Take care, everyone. Have a